We're going to move on to the next part of the itinerary, which is Shaykh Abdal Aziz, who's kindly joined us from Scotland just this morning, drove down. We're blessed to have you here, and it's a privilege for that. He's been in the last couple of meetings as well, and he's going to enlighten us with his response, his thoughts about the NHS BT protocol discussion, that kind of discussion we just talked about. After which we'll have a really short, we'll have a panel discussion. So please, if you take the stage.
Thank you very much, and I was asked to respond, so to speak, to the protocols that were presented by Angela. Thank you very much. So I'm going to kind of keep it brief, because what I hope to do is perhaps raise a few questions and issues from within the context of the ethnic minority communities. First of all, one of the presentations, certainly in the Scottish context, has been that there's been this massive change in the law, and now the government owns your body. And this is a misconception that is kind of alluded to when Angela mentioned about some of the myths, that if you don't do something about it, they're going to come and take all of your organs when you're dead. And that kind of mode is something that's really quite problematic in some areas, in some parts of the community. When in reality, all it is really a culture shift. And in terms of technicalities, there's not a really great deal of difference. But what it does do, one, it first of all stimulates discussion, and as I say, hopefully gets some kind of culture shift. So instead of thinking about making that decision to make the organ, to donate your organs, it starts to raise the question, why wouldn't you, rather than why would you? So that's really what the protocols are all about. And if we're able to communicate the purpose behind that, then that's going to be a major step forward. There was an important change which was alluded to by Angela when she talked about the faith and belief declaration, and also about her own role as a specialist communication, and those with these specialist skills in communication. One of the things that's very important here is to think, well, what actually happens at the point of death, and who, when this decision is going to be made about whether to allow organs to be retrieved or not. That discussion is going to take place in a very highly charged environment, in a very stressful environment, and the communication is going to be the key to whether the correct information is going to be provided for decisions to be made. And from the Muslim community, it's important because the question is going to be, who do you trust? Because those decisions are going to be made from a very personal position of who am I going to turn to? And it might be that we have very skilled nurses, but in reality, what the real influences are going to be are probably going to be the person that I should be turning to, who is the Imam. And if that's where the decision or the influence is going to be the most powerful, then certainly we need to be working on making sure that the message of the protocols are going to the right people. Because if we haven't got the right people on board at that point, we're going to end up with difficulties. And it's great to have some very specialist people with these specialist skills in communicating that. But in the end, if the imams don't, or the chaplains don't, and the families have not got the right kind of information, then the right discussions, which was the whole purpose of the change in the law, are not going to take place. And that's one of the things that we need to start looking at in terms of the practicalities of taking this agenda forward. And there was one important point that was mentioned there, was about after-death care. Now, for some of us, that might be quite straightforward. We respect bodies, we respect the dead. However, I had a discussion yesterday with a group of doctors who were invited by the Scottish Government to talk about the protocols and how these will be presented in leaflet form or through the internet. And there was one interesting thing, a doctor who is highly qualified, very experienced, he went off on a tangent about how difficult it is if somebody dies on a Saturday, which is completely irrelevant to the discussion we're having here. But what he's saying is the fear. He's talking about his own father died on a Saturday, and he's witnessed people, obviously he works in a hospital, and he's had to declare death on a Sunday, on a Saturday, so he's used to it. But the idea that somehow if a death takes place, there'll be this slight delay, really threw him and everybody in the room into complete panic, which actually, if you look at it, is totally illogical, because there's no change in the protocol that's going to lead to an increased delay. In fact, if anything, it might actually make things smoother, because we're planning things slightly better, because we want an outcome which is very specific. And that, if anything, is going to make things easier and reduce the panic. But these are professionals invited by the Scottish Government to discuss organ donation, and the panic was about this very point, about how long until the funeral will take place if you decide to donate an organ. So here, some of the issues that we need to communicate to the key people may not be sufficient simply by just changing the law and introducing some improved protocols at that level. Really, it requires addressing these myths, addressing these issues, and in some cases addressing the legitimate concerns about the religious validity of organ donation. And I think the last time I was here, I pointed out that the recent fatwa, or the fatwa that came out in June last year, in my view, actually causes greater confusion than any level. It's, for me, it's actually really problematic. And if we don't address those questions, we will actually reduce the number of people donating organs from the Muslim community. And at the moment, what we're doing is we're trying to boost and strengthen this fatwa, because somehow we see it as being useful. And actually, I think it's counterproductive, because, for example, if anyone's had the opportunity to read it, the summarized version says that organ donation is permitted except for the donors. So this is the statement that's mentioned. However, in the document, in the actual fatwa, it says, I conclude that the impermissibility of organ donation after determination of brain death prior to circulatory cessation of circulatory processing and cardiac arrest. In other words, he's saying it ain't possible. He also refers to a fatwa which came out in 1985 to say that if you were to adopt that fatwa, you still couldn't, which says you cannot donate organs, you still can't donate them because the process does not quite match what the fatwa said. Actually, I disagree with him, but that's what it implies. So that confusion that's being caused by the fatwa actually works against the introduction of the protocols. So the reason why we had this meeting yesterday with the Scottish Government was in effect to design a leaflet. And I says, well, I'm not going to have anything to do with this, because if the fatwa is going to be the part of that leaflet, it's just going to cause more confusion. What we really need to do is to get down to the real issues. Plus, we need to remove the myths. And I was really pleased when I heard some of the things that Angela was saying about, it's quite clear that you understand what the myths are, and you're prepared to talk about them. But in my view, there's too few people prepared to talk about them, and they are the right people, but there's not enough of them. The right people at the right time will include the imams, because in the end, Muslims, whether they're practicing or not, when it comes to death, somehow we look to the imam and say, tell me what to do. And the problem in that situation, and I was fortunate enough to spend 4 months in Queen Elizabeth Hospital, and everybody thought I was either a doctor or a chaplain, and I'm neither. But when people did ask me questions, they first look at the length of my beard. Can he really give me a decision? Can he really talk to me about death with that length of beard? And that's the reality. And even within the fatwa and within the presentation by Mufti Zubair, and I respect him a great deal. However, we've made something out of this that's not really, we shouldn't have done. And in there he mentions the difference between the Arabs and the Pakistanis and the non-Pakistanis. So they'll look at me, his beard's too short, and he ain't a Pakistani. And therefore, my advice, no matter how knowledgeable I am, how developed my specialist communications, I love that phrase, no matter how well those are, in the end, if the Imam down the road, who has a longer beard, says, sorry, I don't think you can do it, or I'm not sure, then that means no. So that's where I think we need to start thinking about strengthening the protocols by making sure that it actually fulfills a change that we're trying to get, which is to stimulate debate and change the culture so we shift from why should I have my organs to why shouldn't I? And that's really kind of what I was hoping to kind of raise as a discussion. So I'll try to keep it short. Thanks.